Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. The receipt in my hand says Room 0. That can't be right. There's no Room 0 at any motel. But the night clerk just smiled when he handed me the key. A brass key, not a card. And heavier than it should be. "End of the hall," he said. "Past all the others." If you're listening to this right now, lying in bed maybe, lights off, just know that what I'm about to tell you happened 3 nights ago in Bakersfield, California. And before you ask, yes, I went back to check. The motel is still there. But nobody remembers Room 0. Nobody except me. Now, our story begins. Interstate 5 at midnight is a ribbon of darkness between nowhere and nothing. My phone died somewhere outside Fresno, and the check engine light had been glowing like a tiny orange sun for the last 50 miles. When I saw that familiar blue and red Motel 6 sign cutting through the California desert darkness, I almost cried with relief. The parking lot was packed. Every space taken except for one, right at the end, beneath a flickering streetlight that made everything look like it was underwater. I grabbed my overnight bag from the back seat, locked my Toyota Camry, and headed for the lobby. The automatic doors wheezed open, and the smell hit me first. Not bad exactly, just old, like opening a book that's been closed for decades. The lobby looked normal enough. Same generic paintings of desert landscapes, same worn carpet with that pattern designed to hide stains, same plastic plants gathering dust in the corners. But the clerk, he was maybe 25, thin as a fence post, with eyes that didn't quite focus on anything. His name tag said Marcus, but something about how he wore it, crooked and upside down, made me think that wasn't his real name. "Need a room for the night," I said, dropping my bag by the counter. Marcus smiled, not with his mouth, just his eyes. "Busy night. Convention in town. Truckers' union or something." His fingers danced across the keyboard, clicking keys that didn't seem to actually type anything. "We're all booked up." My heart sank. "Nothing at all?" Click, click, click. His fingers stopped. "Well, there is Room 0. Room 0? It only appears when we're completely full." He reached under the counter and pulled out a brass key. Heavy. Old. With a tag that had a 0 carved into it, not printed. Carved. 120 for the night, cash only. I should have left. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get back in my car and drive until I found somewhere else. But I was exhausted. My car was overheating, and it was just one night. I handed him the cash. He didn't count it, just stuffed it into his pocket, not the register. His pocket. "End of the hall," he said. "Past all the others. You'll know it when you see it." The hallway stretched longer than it should have. I passed room 101, 102, 103, all the way to 130. The numbers made sense until I really thought about it. This was a single-story motel. How were there 30 rooms on one side of one hallway? The carpet changed as I walked. Started normal, that industrial-grade stuff designed to survive anything, but it got older with each step. Thinner. The pattern shifting from modern geometric shapes to something that looked almost hand-woven. The lights changed too. Fluorescent to incandescent to... candles? No, that couldn't be right. But the light was flickering like flame. At the very end of the hall, where there should have been a wall, there was a door. The number 0 wasn't on the door. It was the door. Carved deep into the wood in a way that made it look like the door was trying to swallow itself. The brass key was warm in my hand, almost pulse-warm. I slid it into the lock and it turned on its own. The door opened inward. Silent. Not even a creak. The room inside was normal. completely normal. And that was somehow worse than if it had been strange. Standard Motel 6 layout. Queen bed with a floral comforter that went out of style in 1995. Box TV on a dresser. Little round table with 2 chairs by the window. Bathroom door to the right. I set my bag down. The sound it made hitting the floor was wrong, like it fell further than it should have. The echo lasted too long. The window curtains were drawn. I reached to open them, stopped. Decided I didn't actually want to know what was outside. Not yet. The bathroom was clean. Too clean. Like it had never been used. The toilet paper was folded into that little triangle hotels do, but the fold was perfect. Impossibly perfect. Each edge aligned to the molecule. I splashed cold water on my face, looked in the mirror, and froze. My reflection was a half-second behind. I moved my hand. 1 Mississippi, then my reflection moved its hand. I opened my mouth. 1 Mississippi. Then my reflection opened its mouth. Trick of the light, I said out loud. My voice sounded flat, like the room was eating the sound. Just tired. I sat on the bed, and it didn't make a sound. No springs, no squeak, nothing. Like sitting on solid stone covered in fabric. The TV remote was on the nightstand. I picked it up, pressed power. The TV turned on to static, but not normal static. The dots weren't moving randomly. They were flowing. All in the same direction. Like water. Like something was pulling them from left to right. And in the static, if I didn't look directly at it, I could see shapes. Buildings, maybe. Or faces. Or... I changed the channel. More static. Same flowing pattern. Channel after channel of the same thing. Until I hit channel 0. I didn't know TVs had a channel 0. The screen was black, but not off. Black, like it was showing me something that was actually black. And in that blackness, there was depth. Like looking into a hole that went down forever. Then someone knocked on my door. 3 knocks. Soft, almost polite. I looked through the peephole. The hallway was dark. Not lights off dark. Dark, like the hallway wasn't there anymore. But I could see someone standing just outside. A woman, maybe 40, wearing a Motel 6 uniform. "Housekeeping," she said, but her mouth didn't move. "It's past midnight," I called through the door. "Housekeeping," she said again. Her mouth still didn't move. The sound was coming from somewhere else. Behind her, maybe. Or behind me. I backed away from the door. The knocking came again. 3 knocks, same rhythm, but this time from the bathroom door. Housekeeping. Then from the ceiling. Housekeeping. From under the bed. Housekeeping. I grabbed my phone to call someone, anyone, but remembered it was dead. The room phone then. There had to be a room phone. But when I looked at the nightstand where it should be, there was just a square of dust, like a phone had been there once, long ago. The knocking stopped. The TV was still on channel 0, and in that blackness something moved. Not on the screen. In it. Like something swimming in dark water, getting closer to the surface. I turned the TV off. Pulled the plug from the wall for good measure. The room was silent now. That kind of silence that hurts your ears. Like the air pressure had changed. I needed to sleep. Just a few hours, then I'd leave at first light. Find another mechanic, get my car fixed, never come back to this place. I lay down on top of the covers, still fully dressed, shoes still on. Ready to run if I needed to. Sleep came faster than it should have. In my dream, I was standing in the same room, but it was different. Older. The walls were wood instead of drywall. The floor was dirt. And there were other people here, lots of them. All standing perfectly still, facing the walls. "You're in my spot," someone said. I turned, a man in overalls, covered in dust. His face was wrong, like it had been taken apart and put back together by someone who'd only heard a description of what faces should look like. "This is my room," I said. "No." He shook his head. and I heard his neck bones crack. "This is room 0. It's everybody's room and nobody's. I don't understand. You will." He pointed at the wall. "When it's your turn to face the wall, you'll understand." I woke up gasping. The room was exactly as I'd left it, except the TV was plugged back in, turned on, Channel 0. And in that black depth, something was looking back at me. What I didn't tell you before is what happened in those hours between sleep and waking. The part that exists in the spaces between seconds, where room 0 really lives. I was awake, but not awake. Standing in the room, but also floating above it. I could see myself lying on the bed, eyes closed, but also see myself standing by the window, looking out at something that shouldn't exist. Beyond the curtains wasn't the parking lot. It was a vast space filled with other rooms, hundreds of them, thousands, all numbered 0, all identical, all occupied by different versions of myself, or people who might as well be myself, all caught in the same moment of realization. Some of them were younger. One looked like me at 16, pimply and scared, wearing a Letterman jacket from a high school I'd never attended. Another was older, grayer, with deep lines around his eyes like he'd spent decades looking at things that shouldn't be looked at. But the strangest was the one who looked exactly like me now, down to the same clothes, the same tired expression. He was looking back at me through his own window, and when our eyes met, he mouthed something I couldn't hear but somehow understood. "You're not the first." That's when I noticed the others in my room. Not solid, more like impressions left in the air. A woman in a 1940s dress crying silently by the bathroom door. A child, maybe 8 years old, sitting cross-legged on the floor, staring at a toy truck that flickered in and out of existence. An old man in a 3-piece suit standing at attention by the bed, as if he'd been waiting there for decades. They all turned to look at me at the same time, and their mouths moved in unison. "Welcome home." That's when I understood that room 0 wasn't just a room, it was a collection point. A place where all the people who didn't quite fit anywhere else ended up. The ones who fell through the cracks of reality, who existed in the margins of other people's stories. The child with the toy truck looked up at me with ancient eyes. "I've been here since 1953, he said in a voice that was far too old for his face. "My parents forgot me at a rest stop. By the time they came back, I wasn't there anymore. I was here." The woman in the 1940s dress wiped tears that never fell. "Car accident," she said. "I was supposed to die, but somehow I ended up here instead. Neither dead nor alive. Just waiting." The old man straightened his tie. "I missed my train in 1967, the 11:59 to Chicago. Been waiting for the next one ever since. They all had the same story, variations on a theme. Moments where they should have gone one way but went another. Where they slipped between the cracks of cause and effect and ended up here, in the space between seconds, in room 0. "How long have you been here?" I asked. They looked at each other, confused by the question. "Time doesn't work here," the woman said. "We've been here forever. We've been here for no time at all. We've been here since before we were born." I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Just sat in the chair by the window watching the TV without watching it, waiting for dawn. But dawn didn't come. Not when it should have. My watch said 7 a.m., but outside the window, if I dared to peek through the curtains, it was still pitch black. Not night black. Black like the TV screen. Black with depth. At 8 a.m. by my watch, someone slid something under my door. A piece of paper. Old. Yellowed. I picked it up with shaking hands. It was a receipt. From Motel 6. But the date was wrong. June 15, 1987. Room 0. One night, paid in cash. Then another paper slid under. September 3, 1962. Room 0. Another, December 24, 1999. Room 0. They kept coming. Dozens of them. All different dates. Some from before this motel was even built. Some from dates that haven't happened yet. 2027, 2041, 2089, all for Room 0. I gathered them up, hands shaking, and noticed something. The names. Some of them repeated. The same people, checking in years apart, decades apart. But that wasn't the strange part. The strange part was that one of the receipts, dated October 15th, 2024, 3 days ago, had my name on it. But I'd never been here before. I was sure of it. I'd never... Wait, there was something else. Other receipts with my name, going back years. 2019, 2015, 2011, all the way back to 1998 when I was still in high school. But these weren't just receipts. They were different versions of the same receipt, different handwriting, different signatures. Like different versions of myself had been checking into Room 0 for decades, and the amounts paid kept changing. The 1998 receipt showed $12. 2003 was $28. 2011 was $65, each time more expensive. Like Room 0 was charging interest on something. But interest on what? The bathroom door opened. I didn't open it. It opened, steam poured out, like someone had been taking a hot shower. But I could see through the steam that the bathroom was different. Bigger. The white tiles were replaced with dark wood. And there was someone in there. Standing at the sink. Their back to me. Hello? My voice cracked. They turned around. It was me, but older, maybe by 10 years, maybe 20. Hard to tell. My future self looked tired. So tired. You need to leave, future me said. Now, before it's too late. I can't. The door won't. I tried the door. It opened easily. The hallway beyond was normal. Fluorescent lights, modern carpet. I could hear normal motel sounds. TVS murmuring. Someone coughing. Ice machine humming. Go, future me said. Don't look back. Don't come back. Don't even think about this place. But as I reached for my bag, future me grabbed my wrist. His hand was cold. Ice cold. Wait, he said. You need to understand something first. This isn't the first time we've had this conversation. What do you mean? Look at the receipts again. Really look. I did. And that's when I saw it. The signatures weren't just similar, they were identical, down to the last curve and flourish. But that was impossible. Handwriting changes over time. People change over time. Unless time doesn't work the way it's supposed to. Every time you leave, future me said, you come back. Because part of you never left. Part of you is always here, and each time you come back, you remember a little less of the previous times, until eventually you don't remember at all. You think it's your first time, but you remember. I'm the part that stays, the part that accumulates memory while the part that leaves loses it. I've watched you check in hundreds of times. I've watched you discover the receipts hundreds of times. I've watched you try to leave hundreds of times. And do I ever succeed? Future me smiled sadly. Define success. I grabbed my bag, ran. The hallway seemed shorter now. Room 130, 129, 128. Counting down like a timer. The lobby was bright, normal. A different clerk at the desk. A woman with a normal name tag that said Jennifer. Checking out? She asked pleasantly. Yes, room ... I looked at my key. It was a plastic card now. said room 117. Room 117. I hope you enjoyed your stay. I practically threw the key at her and ran to my car. It started fine, no check engine light, and I drove without stopping until I hit Los Angeles. Checked into a different motel, a Holiday Inn, room 234. Everything normal, everything fine. But that night, when I looked in the bathroom mirror, my reflection was still a half-second behind. What happened next, I've never told anyone. Because who would believe it? I became obsessed, not with Room Zero directly, but with the idea of it. I started researching. First online, then in libraries, then in archives that shouldn't have existed. I found references to Room Zero going back centuries. Not always at Motel 6, obviously. Sometimes it was Room Zero at the Overlook Hotel in Colorado. Sometimes it was Room Zero at a boarding house in Salem, Massachusetts in 1692. Sometimes it was Room Zero in a tent city during the California Gold Rush. The constant was always the same. A room that existed in the spaces between other rooms. A place for people who didn't quite fit, who had fallen through the cracks of reality. And every account I found had the same ending. The person would leave thinking they'd escaped. Then they'd come back. Again and again. Each time remembering less about the previous visits. I found newspaper articles about missing persons. People who had checked into various motels and hotels and then vanished. Not died, not kidnapped, just stopped existing in any meaningful way. Their credit cards still worked. Their phones still rang. But when family members went looking for them, it was like they had become background characters in their own lives. There was one article from 1987 that made my blood run cold. It was about a man named David Chen who had gone missing after checking into a motel in Bakersfield. His wife said he called her to say he'd gotten a room for the night. But when she called back the next morning, the motel claimed they had no record of him ever being there. The article included a photo. David Chen looked exactly like the old man in the three-piece suit I'd seen in Room Zero. I found more photos. The woman in the 1940s dress was Margaret Santos, who had disappeared in 1943 after her car broke down outside Fresno. The child was Tommy Williams, who had gone missing from a rest stop in 1953. All of them had been seen, but none of them had ever been found, because they were all in Room Zero, caught in the moment between 1 second and the next, existing in the pause between heartbeats. I tried to stop researching, tried to forget, tried to go back to my normal life. But every night my reflection was a little more delayed. Every night I could feel something pulling at me. Like a rubber band stretched to its breaking point. I lasted 2 days. 2 days of jumping at shadows, of seeing that black depth every time I closed my eyes, of feeling like something was following me. Not following exactly, more like waiting for me to come back. My reflection got worse, 1 second behind, then 2, then 3. By the second night, I'd brush my teeth and my reflection would still be getting out of bed. I knew what I had to do. You can't leave Room Zero. Not really. Part of you stays there. Part of everyone who's ever been there stays there. That's why there were so many receipts. The same people, over and over. Because once you've been in Room Zero, you always come back. The drive back to Bakersfield was like moving through syrup. Time felt wrong. The radio kept playing the same song, Hotel California by the Eagles, even when I changed the station, even when I turned it off. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. The Motel 6 was exactly where I'd left it. Same packed parking lot, same spot open at the end. I parked, walked to the lobby. Marcus was there. Same upside-down name tag, same unfocused eyes. "Welcome back," he said, and pulled out the brass key without me asking. "Room Zero is waiting. How did you know I'd come back?" He smiled with just his eyes again. "Everyone comes back. That's what Room Zero is for. It's the room for people who don't belong anywhere else. People who fall through the cracks. People who exist in the spaces between seconds. I don't understand. You will. But this time, as he handed me the key, I noticed something I'd missed before. Marcus's name tag wasn't just upside down. It was backwards, like I was seeing it in a mirror. And when I looked closer at his face, I realized I was looking at myself. A version of myself that had been working the night desk at Motel 6 for decades, greeting guests who were all versions of the same person. "How long have you been here?" I asked. "Since the first time I checked in," Marcus Me said. "Someone has to work the desk. Someone has to make sure Room Zero is always available when it's needed." The walk down the hallway was different this time. I could see the other guests, not in their rooms, in the hallway, standing perfectly still, facing the walls, just like in my dream. Men, women, children, all in clothes from different eras. 1950s, 1980s, some in clothes I didn't recognize. Fashion that hadn't been invented yet, maybe. None of them moved as I passed, but I could feel them watching me, with eyes they didn't turn. And now I could see that they were all me. Different ages, different clothes, different decades, but all me. All the versions of myself that had checked into Room Zero over the years. All the times I'd tried to leave and been pulled back. Room Zero's door was already open. Inside, the TV was on. Channel 0. And in that black depth, I could see myself, standing in the room, watching the TV. Which showed me watching the TV, which showed me watching the TV, which showed infinite recursion. That's what the math people call it, when something references itself forever, like two mirrors facing each other. But this wasn't a reflection. This was something else. I walked into the room. The door closed behind me, and I understood. Room Zero isn't a room. It's a moment. The moment between 11:59:59 and 12:000. The space between today and tomorrow. It exists outside of time. And once you've been here, part of you always is here. That's why my reflection was delayed. The real me was here. Had always been here. Would always be here. What was walking around out there was just an echo, getting fainter, further behind, until it faded completely. I sat on the bed. It still made no sound, because sound needs time to travel, and time doesn't work right in Room Zero. The phone that wasn't there before was there now. It rang. I answered. Housekeeping. It was my voice, but older. Or younger. Hard to tell. "Would you like your room cleaned?" "No," I said. "Not yet. You will." The line went dead. I've been here for I don't know how long. Time doesn't mean anything in Room Zero. Could be hours. Could be years. My watch stopped at 11:59. It's always 11:59 here. But now I understand what Room Zero really is. It's not just a place where lost people end up. It's a pressure valve for reality itself. You see, the universe has a problem. People keep falling through the cracks. Moments that should connect don't. Cause and effect get tangled. People who should exist in one timeline slip into another. Room Zero catches them. All of us. We're the glitches in the system, the people who exist in the margins of other people's stories. The ones who turn left when we should turn right, who miss our trains, who take the wrong exit on the highway of life. And once we're here, we serve a purpose. We become part of the mechanism that keeps reality running smoothly for everyone else. We're the background processes in the operating system of existence. The ones who make sure that when normal people look in mirrors, their reflections keep up. Who make sure that cause follows effect in the proper order. Every person who's ever felt like they didn't quite fit like they were watching their life from the outside, like they were a supporting character in someone else's story. They all end up here eventually, in room 0, in the space between seconds. Sometimes people check in, new people. They always look scared at first, then confused, then resigned. We all go through the same stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and then something else, something there isn't a word for. The TV is always on, Channel 0. And in that black depth I can see everything, every version of this room, every person who's ever been here, ever will be here. We're all here together, and we're all alone. Marcus wasn't lying. Room 0 only appears when all the other rooms are full. But here's the thing. All the other rooms are always full. Full of the echoes of everyone who stayed in room 0. We're in every room, and no room, everywhere and nowhere. I tried to leave once, or will try, or am trying. Tense gets complicated here. I made it all the way to my car, drove home, lived my life, got old, died, and woke up back in room 0, because this is where we really are. Everything else is just the dream. But here's what I've learned in my time here, and this is the important part, so listen carefully. Room 0 isn't a prison. It's a choice. Every person who ends up here chose to be here, even if they didn't realize it at the time. We're all people who at some point in our lives decided we'd rather exist in the spaces between than deal with the messiness of real existence. The businessman who missed his train in 1967, he was running away from a wife who was about to ask for a divorce. The woman who had the car accident in 1943, she was driving away from a family that never understood her. The child lost at the rest stop. He was tired of parents who fought constantly and barely noticed he existed. We all came here because, deep down, we wanted to disappear. Room 0 just gave us a way to do it. But here's the secret they don't tell you in the pamphlet. You can leave. Really leave. Not just the echo leaving that brings you back. Real leaving. You just have to want to exist more than you want to hide. Most of us don't. Most of us have been hiding for so long that we've forgotten what it feels like to want something real. We've become addicted to the safety of non-existence. But sometimes someone comes along who still remembers, who still has enough fight left to choose existence over safety. To choose the messy, painful, beautiful chaos of being real over the clean, empty perfection of room 0. When that happens, room 0 lets them go. Really lets them go. And their space gets filled by someone new, someone else who's ready to stop existing. It's a fair trade. If you're still listening, if you've made it this far, check your reflection. Is it keeping up, or is it a half second behind? A second, 2. Have you ever driven past a Motel 6 late at night and felt pulled, like something was calling you? Have you ever had a dream about a room that doesn't exist? A door at the end of a hallway that goes on too long? Room 0 is waiting. It's always waiting. For people who don't quite fit, who exist in the spaces between, who notice that reality isn't quite as solid as everyone pretends it is. And here's the thing, the real twist, if you've listened to this whole story, if you've made it from beginning to end, then you've already been here. You're already in room 0. This story isn't entertainment, it's a memory. A memory of something that happened, is happening, will happen. Check your reflection right now. Go ahead, I'll wait. See? It's behind, isn't it? Just a little. Just enough to notice if you're really paying attention. Welcome to room 0. We've been waiting for you. The door is always open. Even when it's closed, especially when it's closed. And once you've heard about it, once you know it exists, it knows you exist too. But remember what I told you. You can leave, if you want to. If you choose existence over safety. If you choose the beautiful mess of being real over the perfect emptiness of being lost, the question is, do you want to? Sweet dreams. Oh, and one more thing. Don't look under your bed tonight. That sound you hear, that little scratching sound like a brass key on wood, that's just room 0, reminding you where you really are. The clerk was right. You will understand. You all will. Eventually, everyone does. Story number 2. The first thing I found at her yard sale was my grandmother's wedding ring, the one we buried her with 3 years ago. I know what you're thinking. Maybe it just looked similar. Maybe I was mistaken. But here's the thing about that ring. It had a tiny inscription on the inside that my grandfather had engraved in 1953. Forever yours, even when the stars fall. Poetic for a coal miner from West Virginia, right? And there it was, that exact inscription, worn but readable under the morning sun in suburban Minneapolis. Before you click away, before you tell yourself this is just another creepy story, let me ask you something. Have you ever lost something so precious that you'd recognize it anywhere? Something that just vanished one day? Your favorite childhood toy? That necklace your mom gave you? The watch that disappeared from your nightstand? What if I told you she has it? What if I told you she's waiting for you to find it? The story begins now. Saturday mornings in Maple Grove used to mean sleeping in until noon. Not anymore. Not since I discovered the yard sale on Hemlock Street. I'd driven past that house 100 times before. A perfectly ordinary split level from the 70s with faded yellow siding and those decorative shutters that don't actually shut. Nothing special about it. Nothing that would make you slow down and look twice. But that particular Saturday in early October, something made me stop. Maybe it was the way the morning fog clung to the lawn, or how the handwritten sign reading, "Saturday Sale, Lost Things Found," seemed to shimmer in the pale light. The letters looked wet, like fresh ink, even though there hadn't been rain for weeks. But looking back now, I think it was the silence that really drew me in. You know how suburban Saturday mornings sound. Lawnmowers humming, kids playing, dogs barking. The usual symphony of weekend life. But as I pulled up to that curb, everything went quiet. Not peaceful quiet, expectant quiet, like the world was holding its breath. The woman running the sale sat in a lawn chair behind 3 folding tables. She was maybe 60, maybe 70, hard to tell. Gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, cardigan despite the warmth. The kind of face you'd forget the moment you looked away. Except for her eyes. Pale blue, almost white, like winter sky. When she looked at me, really looked at me, I felt something shift in my chest. A recognition that went deeper than memory. Like seeing your reflection in a funhouse mirror, familiar, but wrong in ways you couldn't quite name. "Morning, dear," she said, and her voice had this quality, like hearing an echo before the original sound. "Looking for anything special?" I almost said no, almost got back in my car. My rational mind was already composing the story I'd tell my coworkers on Monday, about the weird yard sale lady who gave me the creeps. But then I saw the ring. It sat in a small velvet box among the usual yard sale junk. Old VHS tapes, mismatched dishes, a broken toaster. But that ring, I knew it instantly. The Art Deco setting, the small diamond with the tiny chip on the left side where Grandma had knocked it against the kitchen sink 40 years ago. The world seemed to tilt. I felt that peculiar weightlessness you get when you miss a step on the stairs, when your brain hasn't caught up with reality yet. My hands shook as I picked it up, turned it to catch the light. There was the inscription. "How?" I started, but my throat felt full of sand. "Where did you get this?" The woman smiled, not a warm smile, not cold either, just knowing. Like she'd been expecting this exact question from this exact person at this exact moment. "Oh, that little thing?" Been waiting for the right person to claim it. Seems like you recognize it. This is impossible. This ring was buried with my grandmother 3 years ago. I remembered that day with perfect clarity. The weight of the decision. Mom had insisted we bury Grandma with her wedding ring, despite the funeral director's gentle suggestion that we might want to keep it as a keepsake. She wore it for 62 years, Mom had said, tears streaming down her face. She should wear it forever. I'd been there when the casket was closed. I'd seen the ring on her finger catching the light from the funeral home's fluorescent bulbs one last time. The woman tilted her head, studying me with those pale eyes. Are you certain about that, dear? Memory can be such a tricky thing. Perhaps it was lost before. But I was certain. I'd been there at the funeral home. I'd watched my mother slip it onto Grandma's finger one last time. I'd kissed her cold forehead goodbye. Memory, the woman continued, isn't like a photograph. It's more like a watercolor painting in the rain. The colors run, the details blur. What you remember and what actually happened, well, they don't always match up perfectly. She gestured to the ring in my hand. For instance, are you absolutely sure about the inscription? Check it again. I held the ring up to the morning light, squinting at the tiny engraved letters inside the band. My heart stopped. It didn't say, "Forever yours, even when the stars fall." It said, "Forever yours, even when the scars heal." But that was wrong. I'd read that inscription 100 times growing up. Every time Grandma took off her ring to do dishes or garden. It was "stars fall," not "scars heal," wasn't it? The more I tried to remember, the fuzzier it became. Like trying to recall a dream an hour after waking. The harder you grasp for it, the faster it slips away. How much? I heard myself asking. Oh, no charge for things that already belong to you. But, she paused, studying me with those pale eyes. You might want to look around. See what else calls to you. I should have left. Every instinct screamed at me to drop the ring and run. But I couldn't. It was Grandma's ring. It was impossible, but it was real, solid in my hand. So I looked. The first table held ordinary things. A ceramic elephant missing its trunk. A stack of romance novels with water-damaged covers. A rusty toolbox. But as I moved down the line, things got stranger. There was a Polaroid camera that looked exactly like the one I'd gotten for my 13th birthday. Same scratch on the lens cap from when I dropped it at summer camp. I opened the film compartment, empty. But there was still that stick of grape bubble gum I'd hidden there and forgotten about. The gum was fresh, soft, like I'd put it there yesterday, not 15 years ago. I unwrapped it without thinking, popped it in my mouth. The taste was exactly right. That artificial grape flavor that somehow managed to taste both too sweet and too tart at the same time. But underneath that familiar taste was something else. Something metallic and wrong, like licking a battery. That's not possible, I whispered. The woman hummed from her chair. Lots of things aren't possible, dear. Doesn't stop them from being true. Next to the camera sat a teddy bear, brown fur, one eye missing, wearing a tiny red vest. Mr. Buttons. I'd lost him in the move from Chicago to Minneapolis when I was 7. Mom and I had searched every box, called the moving company a dozen times. I'd cried for weeks. I picked him up with trembling fingers. He smelled like our old apartment. Mom's vanilla candles mixed with Dad's cigarette smoke from before he quit. There was the grape juice stain on his left paw. The vest's middle button was still loose, hanging by a thread, just like I remembered. But as I held him, more details came flooding back. Details I'd forgotten. Like how I used to whisper my secrets to him at night, pressing my mouth against his remaining plastic eye so the words would go straight into his brain. How I'd been convinced he could talk back, but only when no one else was around. And I remembered the last time I'd seen him, Not in Chicago during the move, but here, in Minneapolis, in my current apartment, last week. The memory hit me like cold water. I'd been cleaning out my closet, and there he was, stuffed behind some old shoes. I'd pulled him out, surprised but not shocked. Just figured he'd been there all along, forgotten. I'd set him on my dresser, meaning to find a proper place for him later. But when I got home from work the next day, he was gone. I'd assumed I'd misremembered, that I'd put him somewhere else, but now, "These are all mine," I said, my voice cracking. "These are things I lost." "Lost things have a way of finding each other," the woman said. She hadn't moved from her chair, but somehow she seemed closer. The shadows had shifted, though the sun hadn't moved. "Keep looking. The important stuff's usually at the back." The second table made my stomach turn to ice. My dad's wallet, the one that vanished from his hospital room the night he died, still had his driver's license inside, his lucky $2 bill, the fortune cookie paper that said, "Your daughter will make you proud." The leather was worn soft from years in his back pocket. I could smell his cologne on it. Old Spice mixed with the lingering scent of the leather cleaner he used religiously every Sunday morning. Dad had been meticulous about his things, especially that wallet. He'd had it since before I was born, a graduation gift from his father. Inside were credit cards that should have been canceled years ago. A business card from his first job out of college, faded and soft at the edges. A photo of me at age 6, missing 2 front teeth, grinning at the camera from my spot on his shoulders at the county fair. But there were other things too, things that couldn't have been there when he died. A receipt from a coffee shop that hadn't existed 3 years ago. A note in his handwriting that said, "Tell Sarah the truth about her mother." A ticket stub from a movie that came out last month. A jewelry box that played Claire de Lune when you opened it. Mom's. It had disappeared during her battle with dementia, along with all her good jewelry. She'd accused the nursing home staff of stealing it. We'd never found it. The music box was exactly as I remembered. Dark wood with mother-of-pearl inlay, a tiny ballerina that spun when the lid opened. But when I wound the key and opened it, the song was wrong. Instead of Claire de Lune, it played Happy Birthday, slow and eerie in the higher registers. Inside was Mom's jewelry, all right, but not the jewelry I remembered. These were pieces I'd never seen before. A sapphire necklace that looked expensive, earrings with stones I couldn't identify, a charm bracelet heavy with silver figurines I didn't recognize. At the bottom of the box was a photograph. Mom and a man I'd never seen before. They were dancing, both of them young and laughing. Mom looked maybe 20, wearing a dress I'd never seen in any family photos. The man had his arms around her waist and they both wore matching wedding rings. But Mom had never been married before Dad. She'd told me that story 100 times, how she'd been so focused on her career, how she'd never found the right person until she met Dad at 32. I flipped the photo over. In Mom's handwriting, "Michael and me, honeymoon, 1978. Dad's name was David, and Mom hadn't been born until 1960, a basketball covered in signatures, my high school team, the year we went to state. It had vanished from my trunk after the championship game. Coach always said someone from the other team probably took it as a prank. But the signatures were wrong. Names I didn't recognize mixed in with ones I did. And instead of state champions 2009, the ball said regional runners-up 2010. We'd never made it to regionals in 2010. I'd broken my ankle in the semifinals. We'd been eliminated in the first round. Each item pulled at something deep in my chest. Memories I'd locked away because losing these things had hurt too much. But they weren't the right memories. They were close, like looking at your life through a slightly warped lens, but the details were all wrong. "Why do you have these?" I asked, but I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. The woman stood slowly, joints creaking like old floorboards. "I don't have them, dear. They're just here, waiting, always waiting for someone to remember what was lost." She moved to the third table, gestured for me to follow. "But sometimes," she continued, her voice softer now, almost hypnotic, "we don't remember things quite right. Sometimes what we think was lost, well, maybe it never existed the way we thought it did." This table was different. These weren't my things, at least not yet. A hospital bracelet with my name on it, dated next month. The plastic was that particular shade of hospital white blue, and it had that smell, antiseptic mixed with fear and fluorescent lights. My name was printed in block letters, Sarah Elizabeth Chen, but my middle name was Marie, not Elizabeth, and my last name was Johnson, not Chen. I checked the date again, November 15th, 2024, next month. The admission time was listed as 3:17 a.m. Emergency admission. A set of car keys I didn't recognize, but the keychain, it was the rabbit's foot my boyfriend had just bought me last week, the one currently hanging from my rearview mirror. These keys were scratched, worn, the rabbit's foot faded and missing half its fur. The keys felt familiar in my hand, though I'd never seen them before. They were for a Honda, according to the logo, but I drove a Ford. The metal was warm, as if someone had just been holding them. One of the keys had a chip in it, and somehow I knew that chip had happened in a grocery store parking lot on a Tuesday afternoon when I dropped them reaching for a shopping cart. But I'd never owned a Honda. I'd never dropped keys in a grocery store parking lot. A funeral program. The photo was too blurry to make out, but I could read the date. December 15th, 2024. 2 months from now. The paper felt expensive, heavy stock with embossed gold lettering. In loving memory at the top, followed by dates, 1987 to 2024. My birth year. The photo was definitely a woman, though the features were indistinct, like looking at someone through frosted glass. Inside the program were songs I'd never heard of, readings from books I'd never read, and a list of survivors that included names I didn't recognize. At the bottom, in small print, "In lieu of flowers, donations may be made to the Lost Things Foundation." "These aren't lost things," I said, backing away. "These are things that will be lost," the woman finished. "Time isn't as straight as people think. Lost is lost, whether it's yesterday or tomorrow." My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Mom. "Where are you? Breakfast is getting cold." Mom, who'd been dead for 2 years. I looked at the phone screen. The message was real. Her contact photo smiled back at me. Taken last Christmas, she'd said. Last Christmas when she was already gone. But as I stared at the photo, it began to change. The smile became sadder, the eyes more hollow. The colors faded to sepia, then to black and white, then to nothing at all. The text message changed too. "Where are you? I'm getting cold. What is this place?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. The woman moved closer. She smelled like dust and forgotten rooms, like the inside of old music boxes, like pressed flowers and books no one opens anymore. But underneath that was something else, something organic and dark, like soil after rain, like the inside of a grave. "Every town has one," she said. "A place where lost things gather. A thin spot where what was and what will be get tangled up with what is. Most people drive right past. But some people need to find what they've lost, or lose what they've found." She picked up something from the third table. A wedding ring. Not my grandmother's. This one was men's, simple gold band. She held it out to me. "Your husband's," she said. "He'll lose it on your honeymoon. Disappears in the ocean while you're swimming at night. You'll both search the beach for hours with phone flashlights. You'll cry. He'll promise to buy another one, but it won't be the same. I'm not married. I don't even, not yet. She placed the ring in my palm. It was warm, like someone had just taken it off. But you could keep it safe. Give it back to him before he loses it. Change the story. The ring felt heavy, real, more real than anything should feel. And somehow, holding it, I could see the scene she'd described. A beach at night, dark water lapping at the shore. A man I'd never met but somehow loved desperately. Tears streaming down his face as we searched by the light of our phones. I could feel the sand between my toes, cold and gritty. Could taste the salt in the air. Could hear his voice, "I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry." Or, she continued, reaching for the funeral program, you could know whose funeral this is. Be prepared. Say goodbye, properly this time. Stop. I dropped the ring. It clattered on the table, rolled toward the edge. This is insane. You're insane. I'm leaving. But when I turned toward my car, it wasn't there. The street looked different. Older. The trees were smaller, younger. The house across the street was painted blue instead of white. And in the driveway, where my Ford should have been, sat a Honda Civic with a familiar rabbit's foot hanging from the rearview mirror. "When am I?" I asked. "Saturday," she said simply. "It's always Saturday here. Every Saturday that ever was or will be, all stacked on top of each other like pancakes. Thin spots, dear. That's what makes them special." The woman walked back to her chair, settling into it with a satisfied sigh. "Time isn't a river, you know. It's more like a lake. Deep in some places, shallow in others. And sometimes, if you know where to look, you can wade right across from one year to another." She gestured to the tables around us. "This is a crossing place, where lost things wash up on the shore. Some from the past, some from the future. All of them looking for someone to claim them." I ran, not to where my car should have been, but down the street, looking for something familiar. The neighborhood kept shifting. One moment it was my current Maple Grove, the next it was older, newer, different. Houses appeared and disappeared. Cars changed from modern SUVs to station wagons to things I didn't recognize. Sleek, silent vehicles that must have been from years not yet come. The houses seemed to breathe around me. Windows blinked like eyes. Doors opened onto rooms I'd lived in as a child. Rooms from dreams I'd forgotten. Rooms that existed only in the space between sleeping and waking. I passed a house where I could see myself through the kitchen window. But I was 7 years old, standing on a chair to reach the counter, helping my mother make cookies. Through another window, I was 18 and crying over some boy whose name I couldn't even remember now. In a third, I was elderly, gray-haired, sitting alone in a room full of cats I'd never owned. But the yard sale was always there. No matter which way I turned, I could see it at the corner of my eye. The yellow house, the 3 tables, the woman in her chair, patient as death. I found myself back at the tables. "Running doesn't work," she said. "Not from lost things. They always find you eventually." On the first table now sat my purse. The one in my car. My current purse. Today's purse. Inside was my wallet, my keys, my phone. All exactly where they should be, except they were here, and that meant, "Where's my car?" I asked. "Lost," she said. "Happens sometimes when people find this place. Don't worry, it'll turn up. Everything does, eventually." I grabbed my purse, clutched it to my chest. "I want to leave, please. I just want to go home." "Of course, dear. But first, you need to choose." She gestured to the tables. They were covered now, absolutely covered, with things I recognized. Every lost item from my entire life. Baby teeth in a small envelope. A love letter from high school I thought I'd thrown away. The password to my old email account written on a Post-it note. My college acceptance letter that got lost in the mail, forcing me to call the admissions office in tears. and things I didn't recognize yet. A baby's hospital bracelet, a wedding invitation with my name on it, but a date 10 years in the future. A photograph of me with gray hair, standing next to people I'd never met. But there were darker things too. A police report with my name on it. A restraining order I'd apparently filed against someone I'd never heard of. A medical chart detailing injuries I'd never received. A death certificate, not mine, but signed by me as next of kin for someone called Michael Chen. "Everyone who finds this place has to choose," the woman said. "You can take what you've lost. Reclaim your past, but for everything you take back, you lose something from your future." Or ... quote. She smiled that knowing smile. "You can leave it all. Let the lost stay lost. Keep your future intact. That's not a choice. That's cruel. Life's cruel, dear, full of lost things. The question is, what can you live without?" I looked at my grandmother's ring. God, I wanted it. Wanted that piece of her back. But what would I lose? What future moment would vanish? The baby bracelet caught my eye again. Would taking Grandma's ring mean losing a child I hadn't even had yet? "How do I know what I'm trading?" I asked. "You don't. That's what makes it interesting." My phone, the one in the purse I just grabbed, buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The ring for the baby. The camera for the wedding. The bear for the goodbye. Choose wisely. "Who sent this?" The woman shrugged. "Could be you. Will be you. Was you. Time's funny here." As I stood there, frozen by indecision, the woman began to hum. It was a tune I recognized but couldn't place. Something from childhood, maybe a lullaby my mother used to sing. But the words that came to my mind weren't comforting. Lost things, all in a row. Which ones to keep, nobody knows. Take one back, lose one ahead. Choose your regrets with care, she said. I stood there for what felt like hours. Maybe it was minutes, maybe it was years. Time didn't mean anything in this place where all Saturdays existed at once. The woman kept humming, and with each note, the items on the table seemed to glow brighter. My grandmother's ring pulsed like a heartbeat. Mr. Buttons's remaining eye seemed to blink. The photos fluttered through, there was no wind. "I have to choose, don't I?" I finally said. "Everyone chooses, dear. Even choosing not to choose is a choice. What happens if I take nothing? Then you go back to your life. Your real life. The one where things stay lost when they're lost, where time moves forward like it should, where you never know what's coming until it arrives. And if I take everything?" The woman's smile faltered for the first time. That's never happened before. I don't know what would happen if someone tried to take back every lost thing, but I imagine you'd lose your future entirely. Become unstuck from time, like me. For the first time, I really looked at her. Really saw her. The way her edges seemed soft, like a photograph slightly out of focus. The way the shadows didn't fall quite right around her. The way her voice echoed just a little too long. "You're lost too," I realized. "You're someone's lost thing." She nodded slowly. "I've been here so long I can't remember who I was before. Can't remember who lost me or when. All I know is this place, these tables, these choices. Is that what you're offering me? To become like you? I'm not offering you anything, dear. I'm just the keeper. The choices are yours to make." I looked at the tables one more time, at all the things I'd lost, all the things I would lose, at the life I'd lived, and the life I might live. Finally, I set down my grandmother's ring, put back Mr. Buttons, let go of Dad's wallet, left Mom's jewelry box closed. One by one, I returned every item to its place on the tables. I choose my future, I said. I choose what hasn't been lost yet. The woman nodded slowly. Wise. Or foolish. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. But then I picked up one thing, the smallest thing. A post-it note with a phone number written in my grandmother's shaky handwriting. No name, just 7 digits in fading blue ink. What's that? The woman asked. I don't know, I said, but it's mine. The world snapped back into focus. My car was there, right where I'd parked it. The yard sale looked normal, just one table now, with ordinary junk. The woman looked like any other elderly neighbor having a sale. Have a nice day, dear, she said, like nothing had happened. I got in my car, drove away, made it 3 blocks before I had to pull over because my hands were shaking too bad to steer. The only thing I'd kept was the post-it note and the knowledge, the memory of what I'd seen, what could be lost, what would be lost. That night, I called the number on the post-it. It rang once, then connected to voicemail. My grandmother's voice, clear as day. You've reached Eleanor. I can't come to the phone right now, but if you found my number after all these years, then you probably have something important to say. Leave a message. I hung up. Called back immediately. This time, someone answered on the first ring. Sarah? It was my grandmother's voice, but younger, stronger. I've been waiting for your call. Grandma? But you're dead? Yes, I know. But I'm also here in the place where lost things go. I wanted to tell you something before you lose the ability to hear me. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break my ribs. What? The ring. My wedding ring. The inscription you remember, forever yours, even when the stars fall. That's not what it said. But it's what it should have said. What it says in the timeline where your grandfather wasn't afraid to be romantic. Where he didn't think poetry was foolish. I don't understand. You chose your future, sweetheart. But you also chose which past you wanted to remember. The ring in that yard sale came from a different timeline. One where things went differently. The post-it note you took, that's a connection point. A way to remember the other possibilities. The line crackled with static, her voice growing fainter. Grandma, wait. I'm proud of you for choosing what you chose. But remember, dear, lost things aren't always gone. Sometimes they're just waiting in a different place, a different time. And sometimes, if you're very careful and very brave, you can find new ways to connect with them. The line went dead. I tried calling back, but the number was disconnected. When I checked my phone the next morning, there was no record of the call. The post-it note was blank. But I remembered, that was 6 months ago. I've driven past that house every Saturday since. It's just a normal house. Sometimes there's a yard sale, but it's never her. Never those tables. Never my lost things. But I know she's there, somewhere, every Saturday, waiting. Because last week, I lost my keys. Simple mistake. Left them somewhere, couldn't remember where. Tore apart my apartment looking for them. Then I remembered her words. Lost things have a way of finding each other. This morning, I woke up to a text from that unknown number. Saturday. Hemlock Street. Your keys are waiting. I'm sitting in my car now, parked 3 houses down from that yellow house. There's a yard sale sign in the lawn. The fog is rolling in despite the weather report saying clear skies. And I can see her, sitting in her lawn chair, waiting. My keys are probably on that first table. Easy to grab, easy to reclaim. But what else is there? What else have I lost without knowing it? What am I about to lose? I'm going to get out of this car. I'm going to walk over there. Because that's the thing about lost things. We can't help but want them back. Even when we know the cost. Even when we know that some things should stay lost. She sees me. She's waving, that knowing smile on her face. Welcome back, dear, I can almost hear her say. I've been saving something special for you. God help me. I'm opening the car door, but this time I'm not going alone. Because 3 nights ago, I met someone at a coffee shop. A man with kind eyes and calloused hands who helped me pick up my papers when the wind blew them off my table. His name is Michael, and when he smiled, I felt something I'd lost long ago click back into place. He's sitting in the passenger seat now, holding my hand as I stare at that yard sale. "Are you sure about this?" he asks. I squeeze his fingers. "No, but I need to see what she has for us." "Us?" I show him the text message. It's changed again. Saturday. Hemlock Street. Your keys are waiting, both of you. Michael's face goes pale. "Sarah, I lost my car keys 3 days ago. I've been taking the bus to work." We look at each other, then at the yard sale. The woman is standing now, waving us over with both hands. On the table in front of her, I can see 2 sets of keys glinting in the morning light. "So, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Have you ever found something you lost in an impossible place? Something that shouldn't have been there? Something that made you question everything? Because if you have, then you know about the thin spots, the places where lost things gather. And if you haven't, well, check your local yard sales. Check them carefully. She might be waiting for you too. The Saturday yard sale lady is always there, every Saturday, in every town, waiting with your lost things, waiting to make a deal. Sweet dreams, if you can manage them. And hey, if this story kept you up, if it made you think about all the things you've lost over the years, share this with someone who's lost something precious. Because sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that might be true. Sometimes they're happening right now, on a quiet street, at a yard sale, this Saturday. Story number 3. The popcorn was still warm when I saw myself die on that screen. Not in some dramatic Hollywood way, but quietly, alone, in a hospital bed that looked exactly like the one my grandmother passed in last spring. The massive outdoor screen flickered once, twice, then went dark, leaving me sitting in my beat-up Honda Civic at the Starlight Drive-In, wondering if what I'd just witnessed was real, or if someone had slipped something into my cherry Coke. Before you think I'm crazy, let me tell you what happened that night. Because if you're listening to this, if you've found this recording, then maybe the starlight is calling to you too, and you need to know what you're getting into. Now, the story begins. 3 weeks ago, I was just another insomniac in Millbrook, Indiana, scrolling through my phone at 2 a.m. when I saw the post. Someone in a local Facebook group had shared a blurry photo of an old drive-in theater sign, half hidden by overgrown kudzu vines. "Found this on Route 49, they'd written. Thought the Starlight closed in '87. It had. My dad used to tell stories about taking my mom there for dates, back when Reagan was president and gas cost less than $1. The place had been abandoned for decades. Everyone knew that. But there it was in the photo. The neon tubes glowing that soft pink and blue, spelling out, "Now showing your future," on the old marquee. I should have kept scrolling, should have dismissed it as some urban explorer's prank with LED strips and a portable generator. But something about that sign, something about those words, they lodged in my brain like a splinter. The next night, I couldn't sleep again. The house was too quiet. That kind of quiet that makes you hear every creak, every settling beam, every whisper of wind through the gaps in the siding. My roommate Tyler was at his girlfriend's place. Just me, the darkness, and that damn photo burned into my retinas every time I closed my eyes. By 11 p.m., I was in my car. Route 49 stretches through the flatlands outside Millbrook like a black ribbon. Cornfields on either side, broken only by the occasional farmhouse or grain silo. I'd driven it 100 times in daylight, but at night it felt different. Like driving through the bottom of an ocean, my headlights cutting through the darkness but never quite reaching far enough. The GPS kept trying to reroute me. "Make a U-turn when possible," the robotic voice insisted. But I knew where the old Starlight property should be. About 15 miles out, just past the abandoned Texaco station with the caved-in roof. I almost missed it. The entrance was nearly invisible, just a gap in the trees where the gravel road turned off the highway. No sign visible from the main road, but as soon as I turned in, there it was. The massive screen rising out of the field like a monument to forgotten Saturday nights. And the neon. God, the neon was beautiful. Not harsh or glaring, but soft, inviting, like candlelight through a frosted window. The ticket booth sat empty, its window dark. A chain hung across the entrance, but it was loose, sagging, easy enough to drive around. I probably should have stopped there. Should have taken a photo for the Facebook group and turned around. But I didn't. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into the lot. Row after row of speaker posts stood like metal soldiers, most broken or bent at odd angles. Weeds pushed through cracks in the asphalt. But in the very front row, one spot looked different, cleaner. The speaker post straight and undamaged, its metal surface reflecting my headlights. I parked there. Of course I did. The speaker was one of those old metal boxes, the kind you'd hang on your window. I'd never actually used one before. They were already obsolete by the time I was old enough to drive. But when I lifted it from its cradle, it felt warm, like someone had just been holding it. Static crackled when I hung it on my window. Then, music. That old-timey intermission music they used to play. The kind with the dancing hot dogs and singing sodas, except the lyrics were wrong. "Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all see what will be." The screen flickered to life. At first, it looked like static. That black and white snow you'd see on old TVs when they lost signal. But gradually, shapes began to form. Colors bled in from the edges, and then I was looking at myself, not like looking in a mirror. This was me from behind, sitting in my car, in this exact spot. I could see the back of my head, my hands gripping the steering wheel. On the screen, I turned around slowly, and when I saw my face, my blood went cold. I looked older. Not by much, maybe 5, 6 years. There were lines around my eyes that weren't there now. A scar on my chin I didn't recognize, and my expression, God, I'd never seen myself look so tired, so defeated. The scene changed. I was in an office, one of those soul-crushing cubicle farms with fluorescent lights that hum just loud enough to drive you insane. The me on screen was typing mechanically, eyes vacant, wearing a wrinkled shirt and a tie that didn't match. A nameplate on the desk read, "Mark Sullivan, Claims Adjuster." I'm studying to be a teacher. I've never even considered insurance. A woman walked past the cubicle, pretty, professional, wearing a wedding ring. The me on screen watched her go with such longing, such raw pain, that I felt it in my chest. She stopped at another cubicle, kissed a man who wasn't me, and they left together, laughing. The screen flickered. New scene, an apartment. Smaller than the one I live in now. Dishes piled in the sink, empty beer bottles on every surface. The me on screen sat alone on a stained couch, scrolling through his phone, through her photos. Her happy life without him. I wanted to look away, wanted to drive off, leave this place and never come back. But I couldn't move. It was like the speaker wire had fused to my window, holding me there, forcing me to watch as my future unfolded in mundane, devastating detail. Years passed on screen in minutes. The same job, the same apartment, the same routine. Occasionally, the future me would go on a date, join a gym, apply for teaching positions. But something always went wrong. The date would ghost him. The gym membership would lapse. The applications would be rejected. And then, the hospital scene, the one I mentioned at the beginning. Future me, maybe 30 years from now. Gray-haired, alone, hooked to machines that beeped in rhythm with a failing heart. No visitors. No flowers. Just a tired nurse checking charts, counting the hours until her shift ended. The last thing on screen was a newspaper obituary. Small. 3 lines. Mark Sullivan, 58, passed away Thursday. No services planned, no survivors. The screen went dark. I sat there shaking, my hands trembling so badly I couldn't unhook the speaker at first. When I finally got it off and hung it back on the post, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thank you for visiting the Starlight. Your future has been processed. To change your viewing, please return tomorrow night. I drove home at 90 miles an hour, running every stop sign, my high beams on the entire way. Tyler was back when I got there, playing video games in the living room. Dude, you okay? He asked. You look like you've seen a ghost. I laughed, actually laughed, because a ghost would have been better. Ghosts are the past. What I'd seen, I didn't sleep that night, or the next. By the 3rd night, the text message had become an obsession. To change your viewing. Change it how? Change it to what? So I went back. This time there were other cars, 4 of them, scattered throughout the lot. A rusted pickup truck, a minivan with those stick figure family stickers, a Mercedes that looked fresh off the lot, a motorcycle parked sideways across 2 spots. Nobody looked at each other. We all just stared at our individual screens, watching our individual futures unfold. Mine was different this time. Still depressing, but different. In this version, I became a teacher like I'd planned. Married Sarah, the girl from my education program who laughed at my stupid jokes. We had kids, a house with a white fence, the whole American dream package. But there was something off about it. The smiles never quite reached our eyes. The house felt like a museum, too perfect, too clean, like we were afraid to actually live in it. The children, 2 boys, they looked at me the way you'd look at a stranger. Polite but distant. There was a scene at a parent-teacher conference. Sarah and I sat across from a counselor who was explaining that our older son had been cutting himself, that he felt pressure, so much pressure, to be perfect, to live up to expectations. We just want him to be happy, the future me said, but even on screen, it sounded hollow. The scene shifted. Sarah and I in marriage counseling. Her crying, saying she didn't know who I was anymore. That I'd become so obsessed with maintaining the image of a perfect life that I'd forgotten to actually live it. Then divorce papers, custody battles, the boys choosing to live with her. Me in another apartment. Nicer than the one in the first future, but just as empty. Just as alone. The ending was different too. A retirement home instead of a hospital. Visiting hours where no one visited. Bingo nights where I'd stare at the cards without really seeing them. And finally, quietly, slipping away in my sleep while the night nurse did her rounds. The obituary was longer this time. Mentioned my teaching career. My surviving ex-wife and children. But the subtext was the same. A life that looked successful from the outside but felt hollow within. When the screen went dark, I noticed the car next to me. The minivan. The woman inside was sobbing. Just absolute body-shaking sobs. I wanted to check on her, but what would I say? Hey, I saw my depressing future too. Another text. Thank you for returning to the Starlight. Would you like to see another variation? Premium viewings available for select customers. Premium viewings, like this was Netflix for futures. I came back the next night, and the next, and the next. Each time, a different future. Once, I was wealthy, a tech entrepreneur who'd made millions but trusted no one, paranoid that everyone only wanted my money. Another time, I was homeless. A series of bad decisions and bad luck landing me under a bridge, forgotten by everyone I'd ever known. But the pattern was always the same. Alone at the end. Always alone. On the 7th night, something changed. I started recognizing the cars. The same vehicles night after night, drawn back like moths to a flame. The rusted pickup belonged to an old farmer named Jim. I'd seen him at the grocery store in town, always buying just enough food for one, always using exact change, always looking like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. The Mercedes belonged to Dr. Rebecca Hartwell, one of Millbrook's most successful physicians. On the surface, she had everything: money, respect, a beautiful home on Elm Street. But here she was, night after night, staring at some version of her future that terrified her enough to keep coming back. The motorcycle was ridden by a kid named Danny. Couldn't have been more than 19. Leather jacket, piercings, the whole rebellious teenager thing. But his eyes looked older than mine, and the minivan that belonged to Margaret Chen, a mother of 3 whose husband had died in a car accident 2 years ago. I'd seen her at the memorial service holding her children while they cried. What future could be worse than what she'd already lived through? We never spoke, never even acknowledged each other's presence. But there was a kinship in our silence, a shared understanding that we were all here for the same reason. We were all afraid of being alone, of dying unloved, of mattering so little that the world wouldn't notice when we were gone. The projectionist had been right. He wasn't creating these fears. We brought them with us. But on that 7th night, something different happened. Instead of individual screenings, we all saw the same thing. A documentary of sorts. The true history of the Starlight Drive-In. It started in 1952 when Harold Wickham built the theater with dreams of bringing community together. Families from 3 counties would drive out on weekend nights. Kids in pajamas, teenagers on first dates, adults escaping their daily routines for a few hours of shared fantasy. Harold was passionate about his work. He'd handpick the movies, arrange special events, even dress up his characters for Halloween showings. The Starlight wasn't just a business to him. It was a place where people could come together and dream. But Harold had a secret. He'd never married, never had children. He lived alone in a small apartment above the projection booth, and as the years went by, that loneliness ate at him like acid. He'd watch the families in their cars, the couples holding hands, the children laughing, and he'd feel more isolated than if he'd been stranded on a desert island. The irony was crushing. He'd created a place for people to escape their loneliness, but he remained trapped in his own. By the late 1970s, attendance was dropping. Television was keeping people home. Shopping malls were drawing them to new forms of entertainment. The Starlight was dying, and with it, Harold's purpose. The screen showed him in the projection booth on closing night in 1987. The last movie had ended. The last car had driven away. Harold stood at the window, looking out at the empty lot, and made a choice. He never left. The next scenes were fragmented, dreamlike. Harold, alone with the projector, splicing together films, creating new narratives. But these weren't regular movies anymore. They were reflections. Mirrors held up to the deepest fears of anyone who might wander into his domain. At first, it was just urban explorers and thrill-seekers, kids looking for a spooky story to tell their friends. But word spread, whispered rumors about a place where you could see your future. And people came, people like us, carrying their own loneliness, their own certainty that they were destined to die alone. Harold fed on that certainty, not in some supernatural way, but in the very human way that misery loves company. Each night, each viewing, Each return visit validated his own belief that isolation was the human condition, that connection was an illusion, that we're all fundamentally alone. The documentary ended with a close-up of Harold's face, not the twisted projection from before, but his real face. Tired, sad, human. "I'm not a monster," he said, and his voice came through every speaker in the lot. "I'm just a man who never learned how to stop being alone. And now I don't want to be alone anymore." The screen went dark for a moment. Then it flickered back to life, and I saw something that made my blood freeze. It was the lot, live, right now. All of us in our cars, staring at the screen. But we weren't alone anymore. There, in the projection booth window, was a figure. Harold, watching us, waiting. And suddenly I understood. We weren't just viewers. We were Harold's company, his eternal audience. Every night, he showed us our fears to keep us coming back, to ensure he'd never be alone again. The other cars started their engines. One by one, they pulled out of the lot, driving away into the darkness. But I couldn't move. The speaker had somehow fused itself to my window again, its cord wrapped around the glass like a vine. "Please don't go," Harold's voice came through the speaker. And it wasn't the confident projectionist anymore. It was an old man, desperate and afraid. "I know what I've shown you. I know it's terrible, but it's not real. It's just fear. And fear is something we can face together." I tried to start my engine. Nothing. "I've been alone for so long," Harold continued. 36 years in that booth, with nothing but old film reels and the echo of laughter from audiences that will never come back. When you started coming, when all of you started coming, it was the first time I felt human again. The screen lit up one more time. But instead of showing my future, it showed the past. Harold as a young man, full of hope and dreams. Harold, middle-aged, watching his theater empty out night after night. Harold, old, sitting alone in the dark, splicing together nightmares because they were the only thing that brought people to his door. "I can't let you leave," he said, and there were tears in his voice. "Not when I finally have friends again." That's when I realized the truth. The horrible, wonderful truth that changed everything. Harold wasn't keeping us there with supernatural powers. He was keeping us there with guilt, with the recognition that he was just as afraid and alone as we were, that his need for company was the mirror image of our need to not be forgotten. The speaker came loose from my window easily. I could have driven away at any time. Instead, I got out of my car. I walked across the gravel lot, past the broken speaker posts and the weeds pushing through the asphalt, and I climbed the stairs to the projection booth. Harold was there, of course, old and frail, surrounded by decades of film equipment that looked like it belonged in a museum. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't even particularly scary. He was just a lonely old man who'd found a way to make people stay. "I'm sorry," he said when he saw me. "I know it was wrong, showing you those things, making you afraid, but I didn't know how else to." "It's okay," I told him, and I meant it. "I understand." We talked for hours that night, about loneliness, about fear, about the stories we tell ourselves when we're alone in the dark. Harold told me about the golden age of the drive-in, when families would come out every weekend, when the lot was full of life and laughter. I told him about my own fears, about being a failure, about dying alone and unmourned, about waking up at 3 a.m. convinced that I wasn't good enough for anyone to love. "Those futures I showed you," Harold said eventually, "they weren't real. I can't actually see the future, but I can see fear. And everyone who comes here, they're all afraid of the same thing: being alone, being forgotten, dying without having mattered to anyone." "So what do we do?" I asked. Harold smiled for the first time since I'd known him. We make a different movie. The Starlight Drive-In is open again. Not the old Starlight that showed people their fears. The new Starlight that shows people their possibilities. Harold and I spent weeks cleaning up the lot, fixing the broken speaker posts, updating the projection equipment. We put out a new sign, now showing your potential. People come now, real people, not just the lost and lonely. Families from town who want to share something special with their kids. Teenagers on dates who want to experience what their grandparents did. Adults who remember the magic of movies under the stars. But we still get the other kind of visitors too. The ones who wake up at 3 a.m. wondering if they matter. The ones who are afraid of being alone. And when they come, Harold and I show them something different. Not their worst fears, but their best possibilities. Not the futures where they die alone, but the futures where they take chances, make connections, reach out to others who are just as afraid and lonely as they are. Some of them drive away after one showing, probably thinking it was just their imagination. But others come back, and some of them, like Danny and Dr. Hartwell and Margaret Chen, have started helping us run the place. We're creating something here. Not just a drive-in theater, but a community. A place where people can come together and remember that they're not alone. That their fears are shared. That there's always another way to tell the story. Harold died last month. Peacefully, in his sleep, surrounded by all of us who'd become his family. His last words were, "Thank you for staying." I found a letter he'd left for me in the projection booth. It was short. Mark, the Starlight was never about the movies. It was about the audience, about people coming together in the dark and sharing something bigger than themselves. Keep showing them the good stories. Keep reminding them they're not alone. And remember, your future isn't written yet. None of ours are. So here I am, the new projectionist at the Starlight Drive-In. Every night, under the stars, showing people that their stories don't have to end in loneliness. That there are always other possibilities. And if you're listening to this, if you found this recording, maybe you need to hear that too. Maybe you're one of those people who wakes up at 3 a.m. wondering if you matter. Wondering if you'll die alone and forgotten. You won't. Not if you don't want to. Your future isn't a fixed thing. It's not streaming on some cosmic Netflix. It's something you write, one choice at a time, one connection at a time, one act of courage at a time. The Starlight Drive-In is real. We're on Route 49, just past the old Texaco station. The neon sign glows pink and blue every night, and the popcorn is always warm. But more than that, we're everywhere. In every moment when someone chooses hope over fear. In every act of reaching out instead of withdrawing. In every decision to believe that tomorrow might be different than today. Come find us, all of us who've learned that the best way to stop being afraid of dying alone is to start living together. The show starts at sunset, and it never really ends. But I need to tell you about Sarah, about what happened 3 nights ago, because it changes everything. She showed up on a Tuesday alone in her beat-up Honda Accord. I recognized her immediately, not just from the futures Harold had shown me, but from real life. Sarah Martinez from my education program, the one who laughed at my stupid jokes, the one who in Harold's twisted visions I'd married and made miserable. She parked in the 3rd row, hung the speaker on her window, and stared at the screen with that same hollow look I'd worn when I first arrived. I knew she was seeing her future, some version of it that terrified her enough to keep her glued to that spot. During intermission, I walked over to her car. She rolled down her window, and I could see she'd been crying. "Rough show?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. She laughed, but it came out broken. "You could say that. I just watched myself become everything I swore I'd never be. Bitter. Alone. Teaching kids who hate me in a school system that doesn't care." I leaned against her car door. "Want to know a secret?" none of that is real. The futures you're seeing, they're not prophecies. They're just fears wearing the mask of certainty. How do you know? Because I used to see them too. Hundreds of variations of my own failure. And you were in some of them. She looked up at me, surprised. I was? Yeah. We got married in one version, had kids, perfect house, perfect life. And we were both absolutely miserable because we were so afraid of failing that we forgot to actually live. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I've been having panic attacks. Started about 6 months ago. Every time I think about the future, about graduating, finding a job, trying to make a difference, I just freeze up, like I know I'm going to fail before I even start. That's why you came here, to confirm what you already believed about yourself. And you're telling me it's not true. I'm telling you it's only true if you let it be. Sarah, in every future where we were together, the problem wasn't that we loved each other. The problem was that we were both so terrified of messing up that we never took any real risks. We played it safe until safe became a prison. She looked at me for a long time, and I could see something shifting in her expression. Hope, maybe. Or at least the possibility of hope. What are you showing now? She asked. Instead of the nightmares, I mean. Come back tomorrow night and find out. She did come back, and what she saw on that screen wasn't a perfect future where everything went according to plan. It was a future where she took chances, where she failed sometimes and succeeded sometimes and kept trying anyway, where she laughed with her students, fought for what mattered, and yes, where she met someone who made stupid jokes and made her laugh, and they figured out together how to build something real instead of something perfect. When the show ended, she found me in the projection booth. Was that real? She asked. Or just another kind of fantasy? It's a possibility, I told her. But possibilities only become real when you make choices that support them. What kind of choices? I took a breath, remembering Harold's words about courage and connection. Well, for starters, there's a coffee shop in town that makes terrible coffee but has really good pie. And I was thinking, maybe tomorrow afternoon, instead of worrying about all the ways we might fail, we could go there and see what happens when we don't. She smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen from her since she arrived at the Starlight. I'd like that, she said. I'd like that a lot. That was 3 nights ago. Yesterday, Sarah helped me update the projection system. Today, she's bringing her friend Lisa to see a showing. Tomorrow, we're having coffee and terrible pie, and talking about the classroom we might share someday at the elementary school that just posted 2 job openings. I can't promise you a happy ending. That's not how life works. But I can promise you this. Your story isn't over. The screen of your life isn't showing your inevitable future. It's showing you today, right now, and asking you what you want the next scene to be. The Starlight Drive-In will be here when you're ready. Harold's ghost might even approve. He always said the best movies were the ones where people chose hope over fear, connection over isolation, possibility over certainty. The show starts at sunset, and it never really ends. Recording ends. Soft intermission music plays, but this time the lyrics are different. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby, sis. Let's all see what can be. Story number 4. The coffee mug slipped from my fingers this morning, not because I wasn't paying attention, but because I couldn't feel it anymore. The ceramic shattered against my kitchen floor, and I just stood there, staring at the dark liquid spreading across the white tiles. My neighbor's dog was barking. The garbage truck rumbled down Maple Street. Everything sounded normal, except I couldn't feel the cold splash of coffee on my bare feet. That's when I knew it had started again. But wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you something that'll make you want to check under your bed tonight. Something that'll have you testing your senses before you sleep. And if you're brave enough to stick around until the end, Well, you might just discover why some mysteries are better left unsolved. Hit that subscribe button now because trust me, you'll want to hear what happens next week. If there is a next week. The story begins now. My name is Sarah Chen, and I live in a quiet suburb outside Portland, Oregon. 3 weeks ago, everything was normal. I worked my remote job as a data analyst, went to spin class on Tuesdays, grabbed overpriced lattes from the corner cafe. Just another 30-something trying to adult in America. Then Monday happened. I woke up that morning and silence. Complete, absolute silence. My alarm clock showed 7 a.m., its red digits glowing, but no sound. I touched it, felt the vibration of the speaker, nothing. My cat, Mochi, jumped on the bed, mouth opening and what should have been his demanding breakfast meow. Nothing. Panic set in fast. I ran to the bathroom, turned on the faucet. I could see the water rushing, feel it cold against my skin. But no sound, not even when I screamed. The emergency room doctor at Providence Hospital ran every test imaginable. MRI, CT scan, hearing tests. Sudden sensorineural hearing loss, he said, writing on a notepad since I couldn't hear him. Rare, but it happens. Sometimes it comes back. I nodded, pretending to understand, pretending this was just bad luck. But deep down, something felt wrong. The way it happened so suddenly, so completely, like someone had simply switched off the sound. I adjusted, sort of. Closed captions became my best friend. I learned some basic ASL from YouTube videos. My boss at Data Tech Solutions was understanding, moving me to email-only projects. Life went on. Until the next Monday. I'd been dreading it without knowing why. Some primal instinct, maybe. The way animals sense earthquakes. I woke up at exactly 7 a.m. again. This time everything was gray. Not metaphorically. Literally gray. My bedroom walls, which I'd painted sage green last summer. Gray. Mochi's orange tabby fur. Gray. My own skin in the mirror. Different shades of gray. Back to Providence Hospital. Different doctor this time, Dr. Martinez, who spoke slowly so I could read her lips. More tests. Achromatopsia, she wrote. Complete color blindness. Also rare to develop suddenly in adults. 2 Mondays. 2 senses. I'm not stupid. I could see the pattern. But who would believe me? Hey doc, I think I'm losing 1 sense every Monday like some twisted countdown. They'd put me in the psychiatric ward. So I went home to my gray world of silence and waited. The 3rd Monday. That was this morning. Touch went away at exactly 7 a.m. I watched the coffee mug fall in slow motion. Saw it shatter. Saw the coffee splash. Felt nothing. Not the ceramic handle, not the hot liquid, not even the sharp fragments when I tried to clean them up. I'm typing this now, watching my fingers move across the keyboard, feeling nothing. It's like my entire body has been shot with Novocaine. I can see Dr. Martinez's concerned face on the video call, her lips moving with words I can't hear, holding up written questions I answer with nods and shakes. Congenital insensitivity to pain, she writes, though we both know that's not quite right. This isn't just pain, it's all tactile sensation. We need to run more tests. This pattern of sensory loss is unprecedented. Unprecedented. That's doctor speak for, I have no fucking clue what's happening to you. 3 senses down. 2 to go. Smell and taste. Then what? What happens when they're all gone? Do I just exist? A consciousness trapped in a body that can't interact with the world. But here's the thing that really terrifies me. The thing I haven't told the doctors. Every night since this started, I've been having the same dream. I'm standing in a white room, endless white in every direction. and there's someone else there. I can't see them clearly, can't hear them, can't touch them, but I know they're there, watching, waiting. And somehow, I know they're the one taking my senses away. One by one, like they're collecting them. The question is, why? I need to tell you about the notebook. After losing touch this morning, I went full detective mode. If someone or something was doing this to me, there had to be a reason. A pattern beyond just Mondays at 7 a.m. So I did what any desperate data analyst would do. I started documenting everything. I pulled out an old journal from my desk drawer, one of those leather-bound ones my mom gave me years ago that I'd never used. "For your thoughts, sweetie," she'd said. Well, Mom, here are my thoughts. I'm being systematically stripped of my senses by something I can't explain. I started with the basics. When did this really begin? The obvious answer was 3 weeks ago, but was it? I thought back, really thought, and that's when I remembered the garage sale. 4 weeks ago. Saturday. I'd been driving through the Pearl District when I saw it. One of those estate sales in an old Victorian house. You know the type. Dusty antiques, vintage clothes, boxes of mysteries. I love those places. There's something about touching objects that have lived entire lives before you. God, I miss being able to touch things. Anyway, I'd wandered through rooms full of someone's forgotten life. The elderly woman running the sale said the owner had been her aunt, Margaret Wiseman, who'd lived alone for 40 years after her husband died. Kept to herself, the woman said. Bit of an odd duck, but harmless. I bought a few things, a brass compass that didn't point north, a set of Victorian teacups, and a small wooden box with symbols carved into the lid. The woman practically gave it away. Aunt Maggie kept that locked in her attic, she said. Never did figure out how to open it. But I did. That night, sitting at my kitchen table, I'd run my fingers over the symbols and felt them shift, like a puzzle box, pieces sliding into place. Inside was a single black stone, smooth as glass, warm to the touch. I'd held it up to the light, mesmerized by how it seemed to absorb rather than reflect. And for just a moment, I swear I heard whispering. Not words exactly, but intent, hunger. I'd put it on my nightstand and forgotten about it. Until now, I rushed to my bedroom, or tried to. Without touch, navigation is harder than you'd think. I kept bumping into walls I couldn't feel, stumbling over Mochi, who, thankfully, had learned to stay out of my way. The stone was still there, sitting innocently on my nightstand. Only, it wasn't the same. In my gray vision, it should have appeared as a shade of gray like everything else. Instead, it was absolute black. Not gray-black, but a void, like looking into nothing. I tried to pick it up, watched my fingers close around it, felt nothing. But something else happened. The moment my skin made contact, images flashed through my mind. A woman in a Victorian dress standing in this same room. My room, holding the stone. Tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "Take them. Take them all. Just bring him back." Margaret Wiseman. It had to be. More images, faster now. Margaret growing older, grayer, spending decades in this house as one by one, people avoided her. "She's off," they'd whisper. "Something wrong with that one." Because she couldn't hear their gossip, couldn't see the colors of spring, couldn't taste her food or smell her roses or feel her cat's fur. She'd given up her senses. But for what? To bring back her dead husband? Did it work? The images stopped. I was back in my bedroom, the stone still in my hand. And then I saw it. A journal tucked behind my nightstand. Not mine. Old, leather-bound, pages yellowed with age. How had I not noticed it before? I opened it, Margaret's journal. Her handwriting, shaky but determined. Day 1. The trade is made. He promises I'll see James again when the collection is complete. Day 8. Hearing gone. The silence is peaceful. I can focus on waiting. Day 15. Colors faded today. The world is simpler and gray. Day 22. Can't feel anything. It doesn't matter, soon. Day 29. Taste disappeared. Food is just sustenance now. Day 36. Can't smell the roses James planted. Almost time. Day 43. Tomorrow is the last day. He says I'll understand then. I'll transcend. I'll be with James in a place beyond senses. Day 44. I see him, the collector. He's beautiful and terrible. He's opening the door. James is on the other side. I can go through. I just have to let go completely. Become nothing to become everything. But I'm scared. What if it's not James? What if it's not anything? What if I just... Stop. I can't. I'm sorry, James, I can't. The entries stopped there. But there was one more thing, a note. Tucked into the back cover in different handwriting. The stone passes on. The contract transfers. The collector is patient. He'll wait for the next one, weak enough, desperate enough, lonely enough. The count starts over. 49 days, 7 weeks, 7 senses. 7 senses? But humans only have 5. That's when it hit me. The dreams. The white room. The presence I felt but couldn't identify. What if the 6th sense was intuition? That gut feeling that something's wrong. And the 7th, I'm running out of time to figure this out. It's Tuesday now, 6 days until I lose smell, 13 until taste goes. And then, the notebook has more entries, other names, other years. Sarah Mills, 1987. David Carter, 1962. Elena Rodriguez, 1938. All the way back to 1876. All of them made it to day 36, day 43. None of them wrote about day 50. Because they all gave in? Or because I need to find out more? I need to understand what the collector wants. Why the senses? Why 7 weeks? And most importantly, how do I stop this? The stone sits on my desk now as I type. Still that impossible black. Still warm, though I can't feel it. I just know, somehow, it's waiting. The collector is waiting. And I have 27 days to figure out why. I found them today, the others who've touched the stone and lived. It started with a hunch. If Margaret Wiseman had survived her 49 days, maybe others had too. So I did what any millennial would do. I Googled sudden sensory loss, Portland, Oregon. Nothing useful. Then, losing senses 1 week at a time. Still nothing. Finally, desperately, the collector black stone senses. One result. A forum post from 2019 buried on page 47 of the search results. Anyone else survived the 49 days? My hands. I watched them shake even though I couldn't feel them trembling. I clicked the link. The forum was called After the Silence. 17 members. The most recent post was 3 months ago. Still here, still holding on. Day 14,362. Tasteless Tom. 14,000 days. That's almost 40 years. I created an account, Silent Sarah 2024. My first post was simple. Day 22. Touch gone. Found Margaret's journal. Please help. The response was immediate. A private message from someone called Grey World Grace. Video chat now. We don't have much time. I clicked the link she sent. A woman appeared on my screen. Maybe 60s, silver hair, kind eyes that darted nervously. She held up a whiteboard. Can you see this? I nodded. Good. I'm Grace. Day 8,437. I'll type, you respond however you can. Her fingers flew across her keyboard, messages appearing in the chat. You have the Portland stone. Margaret's stone. That's bad. Why? I typed back. Each stone is different. Portland's is hungry. Margaret almost fed it. You found her journal. Yes. She mentions 7 senses, not 5. Grace's expression darkened. She typed faster. Intuition is 6th. The knowing without knowing. You'll lose that on day 43. 7th is consciousness, self-awareness. The thing that makes you you. My blood ran cold, or would have if I could feel temperature. Day 50, you become empty, a vessel. That's when the collector can use you, wear you, walk in our world. Others survived, though. You did. Tom did. We found each other. That's the only way. Connection. The collector feeds on isolation. Margaret was alone. Her husband dead, no family, perfect victim. But I'm not alone. I have friends, co-workers. Grace's face was sympathetic as she typed, Do you? When did you last see them? Really see them? I thought about it, really thought. When had I last hung out with someone? My best friend Kelly had texted last week, but I'd been too overwhelmed with the hearing loss to respond. My sister in California had called, but I couldn't hear her anymore. Work was all emails now, even Mochi. Oh God, Mochi. When did I last feed him? I couldn't feel his fur, couldn't hear his meows. Was he even... I looked around frantically. There he was in his bed, breathing steadily. Alive, but thinner than before. The stone isolates you, Grace continued. Makes you forget others exist. Focus only on what you're losing. That's how it wins. How do I stop it? You need an anchor, someone who refuses to let you go. Margaret almost had one. Check her journal again. Last pages. I grabbed the journal, flipped to the end. There, pressed between the final pages, was a letter I'd missed before. My dearest Maggie, I know you can't hear me anymore when I visit. Can't see the flowers I bring. But I'm still here. Every Sunday, 2 p.m., like we promised. The doctors say you're catatonic, but I know better. You're in there fighting. Please don't give up. Don't leave me too. Your sister, Catherine. October 9th, 1934. Margaret had a sister. Someone who kept visiting even when Margaret couldn't respond. But it wasn't enough, I typed to Grace. She still almost gave in. Almost, but she didn't. Catherine pulled her back. Margaret broke the cycle, but she was damaged, lived another 40 years, but never got her senses back. The stone moved on, found someone else. So, I'm stuck? Even if I survive, I'll never be normal again? Grace leaned closer to the camera, her eyes intense. There's another way, but it's dangerous. Tell me. Break the stone, but... She paused, hands hovering over her keyboard. Everyone who's tried has failed. The stone protects itself. On day 49, when you're weakest, when you've lost everything except consciousness itself, that's your only chance. One moment of perfect clarity before the end. What happens if I fail? You become one of them, the collected, and the stone gets stronger. She sent me a link. The others want to meet you. Portland Support Group. Tomorrow, 3 p.m., Pioneer Courthouse Square. Look for the people standing in a perfect circle, not talking, not touching, just being together. How will I find you without, you'll know. The stone calls to stone. Survivors recognize each other. The chat window closed. I sat back, mind reeling. A support group for people who'd lost their senses to an otherworldly collector. It sounded insane. But then again, so did everything else about my life now. I looked at the stone on my desk. In the late afternoon light, was it pulsing? Or was that just my imagination? My intuition, while I still had it? 27 days left. Maybe less if Grace was wrong about the timeline. I needed allies. I needed anchors. I needed to remember I wasn't alone, even when every lost sense tried to convince me otherwise. Tomorrow, I'd find the others, learn their stories. Maybe together we could figure out what the collector really wanted, why he gathered senses like trophies, and how to stop him from collecting mine. But tonight I had to do something I'd been avoiding. I picked up my phone, opened my messages to Kelly, typed with fingers I couldn't feel. I need help. Something's happening to me. Please don't let me disappear. Then I waited, watching the typing indicator appear and disappear, appear and disappear. Finally, Sarah, where have you been? I'm coming over, now. For the first time in 3 weeks, I felt something like hope. Not physical, but real nonetheless. Maybe Grace was right. Maybe connection was the answer. The stone pulsed again, definitely pulsing now. Like it knew. Like it was angry. Good. Let it be angry. I wasn't going down without a fight. Day 49. I'm writing this with the last of my strength, the last of myself. If you're reading this, either I succeeded or, well, let's hope I succeeded. The support group saved me. Those beautiful, broken people standing in Pioneer Square, connected by shared loss. Grace was there, of course, and Tom, 40 years without taste. But he still smiled. Maria, who lost her sight in 2003. David, deaf since '87. 8 of us in total, all Portland Stone survivors. They taught me how to exist without senses, how to navigate by memory and instinct, how to communicate through presence alone. But more importantly, they refused to let me isolate. Kelly became my lifeline. Every day, she'd come over, clean my apartment, feed Mochi, force me to eat even when food became tasteless cardboard on day 36. She'd hold my hand even when I couldn't feel it, describing the world I couldn't experience anymore. The leaves are changing, she'd say, that brilliant orange you love. Mochi's getting fat. He conned Mrs. Patterson next door into feeding him too. Your mom called. I told her you had the flu. My sister flew in from California on day 40. Set up a whole system, whiteboards in every room, scheduled visits, a group chat with updates. Even my boss got involved, securing extended leave, promising my job would wait. The stone hated it. Every connection made it pulse faster, darker. Sometimes I'd catch it moving, rolling toward the edge of the desk, trying to fall, to break contact. But I kept it close. Grace said that was important. You can't fight what you run from. Day 43 was the worst. Intuition gone. Suddenly, I couldn't tell if people were really there or if I was imagining them. Was Kelly real? Was Grace? Was any of this happening, or was I in a psychiatric ward somewhere, lost in delusion? The collector came that night, not in dreams, in my room. A shadow shaped like absence, standing at the foot of my bed. I couldn't see him exactly, but I knew he was there. The anti-presence, the void that walked. He didn't speak. Concepts flowed directly into my consciousness. Give in, let go, join the others who've found peace in nothing. No more struggle, no more loneliness, just quiet. And for a moment, God, for a moment I wanted to. The exhaustion of fighting, of existing without truly living. It was crushing. What was the point? Why hold on to a broken life when I could just stop? But then I remembered Margaret's journal, her sister Catherine, visiting every Sunday for 40 years. Kelly, asleep in the chair beside my bed, refusing to leave. The support group texting constantly, their presence a digital heartbeat I couldn't ignore. Love. That's what the collector couldn't understand. Love persists even when every sense fails. It exists beyond physical perception, beyond intuition, beyond even consciousness itself. It just is. I held on. Day after day, hour by hour. The stone grew hot enough to burn, though I couldn't feel it. The collector visited nightly, each time more insistent, more angry. My consciousness flickered like a candle in a hurricane, but I held on, and now, day 49. 7 weeks exactly. I can barely form thoughts. Writing this is like moving mountains with my mind, but I need to document this. For the next person. For you, maybe, if you're reading this because you found a strange black stone at an estate sale. The moment is coming. Grace told me I'd know. One instant of perfect clarity before the final descent. That's when I strike. When I break the stone, when I end this cycle. But here's what Grace didn't tell me. What I learned from Tom yesterday, typing with shaking hands. Breaking the stone doesn't return what was taken. It just stops the taking. You'll be free but still broken. Unless you make a different choice. Take the collector's place. Become the new guardian. The senses you've lost return. But you must collect from others. 7 senses from 7 souls every 7 years, or you fade completely. Margaret knew. That's why she couldn't do it. Couldn't condemn others to save herself. So that's my choice. Break the stone and stay broken, but free. Or become the monster to become whole. I know what you're thinking. Easy choice, right? But you haven't lived 49 days in progressive isolation from reality. You haven't felt yourself disappearing piece by piece. You haven't... Wait, the moment. It's here. Everything is suddenly, impossibly clear. I can see the stone on my desk, not just its absence of light, but its true form. A fragment of something ancient, hungry, patient. I can see the collector too, no longer shadow but a man. Just a man. Tired and faded, who made the wrong choice centuries ago. I understand now. The stone doesn't steal senses. It trades them. Every collector was once a victim. Every guardian was once the guarded. The cycle continues because someone always breaks. Someone always chooses themselves over others. But not today. I pick up the stone. It burns, freezes, screams silently. The collector steps forward, hand outstretched. "Please," he says, and I can hear him, actually hear. I'm so tired. So alone, just take it. Take the burden. I just want to rest. For him, I realize, it's also day 49. His 7 years are up. He needs a replacement or he fades to nothing. That's why the stone found me. Why now? Why Portland? "I'm sorry," I whisper, and I can hear my own voice, taste the words, smell the fierce sweat on my skin. For this one moment, I'm whole. I'm so sorry for what they did to you. But I won't continue it. I raise the stone above my head. No, you don't understand. If you break it, they all break. Every stone, every collector, every survivor holding on by thread. I hesitate. Grace, Tom, the others, are they connected to their stones too? Will breaking mine kill them? The collector sees my doubt, steps closer. Just take it. Save them. Save yourself. It's only 7 people every 7 years. Barely anyone in the grand scheme. You can choose bad people, cruel people, people who deserve... No one deserves this. But my hand shakes. The moment of clarity is fading. I can feel my consciousness starting to slip, that 7th sense beginning its final fade. Soon I won't care. Soon I won't be anyone at all. Kelly's hand touches mine. When did she wake up? How did she know? But she's there, real and solid and present. My sister on my other side. And somehow, impossibly, the others. Grace, Tom, Maria, all of them crowding into my tiny bedroom. together. Grace writes on her whiteboard. We all chose freedom over wholeness. Now we choose again. Together. They put their hands on mine on the stone. 8 broken people and 2 who love me. 10 souls against 1 ancient hunger. You'll die, the collector screams. All of you. The stones are life now. Then we die human, Tom says. And I've never heard his voice before, but it's beautiful. Rough and real and alive. Together we bring the stone down. It shattered like night itself breaking. The sound, how do I describe it? Like every silenced scream, every muted color, every unfelt touch, all crying out at once. The collector didn't scream, he just sighed, a release of centuries of burden. As he faded, he looked almost grateful. Thank you, he whispered. Finally. And then, nothing. Darkness. Silence deeper than deafness. A void where sensation should be. I thought I was dead. We all did, I think. But death wouldn't hurt this much. Death wouldn't leave us aware of what we'd lost. I woke in the hospital 3 days later. Apparently, Kelly called 911 when we all collapsed. The official diagnosis was mass psychogenic incident. The doctors had no explanation for why 10 people simultaneously lost consciousness in my apartment. But we knew. The stones were gone. All of them worldwide. The forum exploded with posts. Dozens of survivors waking up, free, but still broken. The cycle had ended. No more collectors. No more trades. No more choosing between wholeness and humanity. I still can't hear. Still can't see colors, or taste, or smell, or feel. The others are the same, still bearing their specific losses. But something else returned. Something the stones had taken that we didn't even know was missing. Hope. It's been a month now. I'm learning to live, really live. Not just exist. ASL classes with Kelly. Cooking by memory with my sister. Daily meetups with the support group. We're broken, yes, but we're broken together, and that makes all the difference. Sometimes I dream of the White Room, but it's not empty anymore. It's full of everyone the stones ever took, finally free, finally at rest. Margaret's there, young again, dancing with her James. The first collector, whoever they were, human, once more, they don't speak. Don't need to. Just smile and wave and fade into whatever comes after. I'm writing this as a warning and a promise. The stones are gone, but evil rarely stays buried. Someone, somewhere, will try to recreate them, to offer desperate people impossible trades, to prey on isolation and grief and the very human desire to be whole. When they do, remember this story. Remember that you're not alone no matter how isolated you feel. Remember that broken doesn't mean worthless. Remember that choosing others over yourself isn't weakness. It's the most human thing you can do. And if you ever find a strange black stone at an estate sale, for God's sake, leave it there. But also remember this: I survived. We all survived. And if you're reading this because you're facing your own impossible choice, your own progressive loss, your own collector, you can survive too. You just have to hold on, reach out, refuse to let go, and know that somewhere in Portland, Oregon, there's a group of people who understand, who've been where you are, who'll stand with you against the darkness. My name is Sarah Chen. I've lost 5 senses, but I've found something more valuable. Proof that love exists beyond perception. That connection transcends sensation. That humanity isn't about being whole. It's about being human, even in the silence, even in the darkness, even when you can't feel anything at all. We're still here, still human, still fighting, and if you need us, we'll find you. Broken calls to broken. Survivor recognizes survivor. The cycle is broken, but the story Our story continues. Just don't forget to like and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because you never know who's holding their own black stone, facing their own impossible choice, counting down their own 49 days. You never know who needs to hear that they're not alone. That's all that matters in the end. Connection. Choice. The refusal to let the darkness win, even if it costs us everything, especially then.